Hello, hope you're doing well. Welcome to episode 107 of Mark Talks About His Stuff. Today is Saturday, 12th of June 2021, Record Store Day. And of course, by rights, I should be talking about Record Store Day, but I don't particularly feel like that at all. Some days I just can't get out of the house, and that sounds really weird because obviously I've got a fully functioning set of arms and legs. But there are some days where I'm just like, any degree of human interaction is pretty tough and is beyond what I'm able to provide. Now, there's a theory around which is called spoon theory, and some days you have more spoons and some days you have less spoons, and some days you can cut the garden, you can do all the washing up, you can do a full day's work, you can do all of those things and you've got spoons left over, and other days you're spoonless, you've got nothing. And today is one of those days where I just I just can't do people. I have been outside, it's a bit peoply, I'm not prepared to do it again. And instead today I'm going to sit in the warm sunshine and I'm going to talk about Pet Shop Boys' 8th studio album release, which is this here, the 2017 vinyl edition of the album. But there's a couple of things that we need to talk about if we're talking about Pet Shop Boys before we get there. The band were very busy around about this period. And I think the last time that I talked about them, I kind of brought us up to a close with the nightlife period and just kind of leaned into the Closer to Heaven soundtrack. Early 2001 was largely presumed or taken up by the band by working on two separate projects. One of which was their reissues program in 2001, and then the other one was the preparation, recording, and writing of the soundtrack to the musical Closer to Heaven. Now, in chronological fashion, I have to talk about the reissues first. These were released in June 2001. Here is a 13-track sampler CD in a specially designed and somewhat bizarrely, you look at that, half matte, half gloss, shiny kind of sleeve promo CD, which had various biographical, not geographical information on. So this was the first time, aside from the greatest hits albums, that Pet Shop Boys had worked in the realm of doing reissues. So what they did is they presented the first 6 albums in deluxe 2 CD editions, which was pretty forward thinking actually. These days you'd get a 37 CD box set of every show that King Crimson recorded in one particular year. At this point the band decided to do double CD editions of the albums, Please and Actually, Introspective, Behaviour, Very, and Bilingual. Not the first double CD edition of Bilingual, obviously, because there was the remix extended version that came out in 1997. And for the extra tracks that they had on this, what they chose to do was to re-release remastered versions of all of their own remixes of their own songs and their own B-sides, or as they called it, master quality recordings by Pet Shop Boys of the associated period on 6 CDs that were called Further Listening. Some really nice unreleased goodies in there, a couple of demos, an early version of I think Why Don't We Live Together, the dance mix of West End Girls, Opportunities, so on and so forth. Actually, again, had a couple of unreleased tracks. So it had a previously unreleased version of Heart and I Want to Wake Up, and One More Chance, and a couple of previously unavailable on CD 12-inch mixes. Introspective, again, had a couple of previously unreleased tracks, so demos of Nothing Has Been Proved and So Sorry I Said, I think, for Liza Minnelli. Behaviour had the previously unreleased track Generic Jingle, which the band recorded in 1991 when they were doing a BBC radio show. They did a week, I think, fronting for, I think, Simon Mayo or Stephen Wright or someone like that. And they did a series of short 15 to 20 second generic jingles that were to be played during the course of the show, which were on the About CD. And then there was Further Listening here, which had it had the original 12-inch A and B side of Go West and the demo of a track called Falling, which they'd written for Kylie Minogue, which appears on her album. Oh, let me see if I can find it. It is on this one here, Indie Kylie. Well, I think this is known amongst the fans as the Deconstruction album because that's the name of the label that it's on. and then there was a bilingual here. Again, double CD version, remastered, with a previously unreleased version of Discoteca and a previously unreleased expanded version of A Red Letter Day. These were also put back into press in 2017. But if you've already got the 2001 versions, Pet Shop Boys have been quite clear, you don't need to buy the 2017 versions. They're just a little bit louder. And there we go. And I've forgotten something, which means I need to come back in a second. Hang on, please. This is what I forgot to mention, is that on my Discogs want list, I have long wanted a copy of the West End Girls 10-inch single from 1985. I paid the price roughly equivalent to £1 for every year that I've wanted it, probably about a tenth of what it cost at the time, but I definitely earned more than a tenth of what I did in 1985. And this is the 10-inch of West End Girls, which I think was designed by Chris Lowe, I think, and it came with a sticker. Obviously someone's opened it, but it is 36 years old now, and a fold-out sleeve with a 10-inch single on it. I have no records that are quite like this in my collection, and I listened to it, and yes, I can definitively prove it is actually a record that you can listen to. The 10-inch mix did appear on CD. So, with all of that historical artifacting available, I then go into talking about I think you could call it a lost Pet Shop Boys album, actually, which was released in October 2001, which was Pet Shop Boys soundtrack to a musical called Closer to Heaven, which was only released on CD. Now, promo CDs of this, whilst the band were working up songs for the Nightlife album, the Nightlife album was originally intended to be almost a Pet Shop Boys recordings of the songs that they'd written for the soundtrack for this Closer to Heaven, but they changed their mind and turned Nightlife into a studio album in its own right. And in the year 2001, recordings by Pet Shop Boys, which they'd pressed onto CDRs and provided to people that worked on the show whilst it was being created and designed, started to circulate. So there's a double CD that's out there. Original CDRs are staggeringly expensive, and I think none of them have come to light. But rips of the CDs have been circulating for about 20 years. It features, I think, 9 songs off the Nightlife album, 10 other completely unreleased Pet Shop Boys recordings, and about 10 alternate versions. So there's about 33, 34 rare Pet Shop Boys songs on those 2 CDs, and almost none of them have been released, with minor exceptions. And of those songs which have been released, none of them have been released with Neil Tennant vocals. So all of the songs that are on the Closer to Heaven soundtrack album, released in October 2001, are new recordings, Pet Shop Boys productions, Pet Shop Boys performances instrumentally, with their standard studio team, but with guest vocalists, the guest vocalists being the actors, actresses, and other performers chosen to be in the Closer to Heaven musical. And it's a fascinating insight into 2 things. Firstly, Pet Shop Boys writing songs from a third-person perspective with a narrative that's built around it. And the second one is there's some great songs on here that were never recorded and released as Pet Shop Boys. So in May, early May, 12th of May, in fact, 2001, cover mounted with the coupon I think you needed to get from the Daily Telegraph newspaper, which is an appalling newspaper full of reactionary bullshit. The cover mounted with the Daily Telegraph newspaper, you could get this CD single, 4-track CD of the Close to Heaven songs from the musical by Pet Shop Boys. And this was in the days when newspapers would sell CDs attached to the front, or DVDs, and where you'd be able to find weird and obscure movies that otherwise hadn't come out on DVD, or you'd buy your Sunday newspaper and you get a free Prince album which you hadn't necessarily expected. That happened a couple of times. But the Close to Heaven 4-track EP features 2 unreleased songs by Pet Shop Boys, the slow version of Close to Heaven, and a studio recording with Neil vocals of a track called Friendly Fire. On the soundtrack album, which sold considerably less than the copies of the Daily Telegraph, by the way, Friendly Fire is sung by Billy Trex, who's vocals by Francis Barber, and there's also the slow version of Close to Heaven is sung by the characters, I think, Straight Dave and Marlon Lee. It's a curiosity, this album. It's got two previously unreleased Pet Shop Boys instrumentals on it, Hedonism and K-Hole, and it's got I think 17 songs in total, including a number of songs which appeared on other albums. So Close to Heaven, In Denial, Vampires, Shameless, appeared in the musical, but also appeared on other albums. Positive Role Model, which is the last song on Close to Heaven, sung by Straight Dave, was performed by Pet Shop Boys live at Glastonbury in 2000. It's built around a big sample from a Barry White song, I think. I can't remember which one, and I'm not quite sure. But no, I saw the Glastonbury 2000 performance. I think I mentioned it in a previous episode. You can see me at Glastonbury 2000 in the crowd shots in that video on YouTube, primarily because when I went to Glastonbury in 2000, I decided that I was going to wear a boiler suit, like an industrial hazmat type thing, because Glastonbury was notorious for having terrible weather, and I thought, rather than have my experience at Glastonbury be spoiled by the terrible weather, I instead bought these white one-piece zip-up, fully sealable kind of industrial clothing painting outfits that you can zip up, and you can really just, no matter how trash your clothing got, you could just screw it up into a ball and throw it away, because it was only ever designed to be worn once anyway. So if you've got a guy in the crowd shots that looks like he should be an alternate, frankly, that's me, when I had more hair up here and less hair down there. But no, Close to Heaven was released in October 2001, and I don't feel like I've missed anything by not seeing it on stage. And in early 2002, I think they also released this single, which is called Break for Love, which is a collaboration between Pet Shop Boys and Pete Rauhofer, whose name I've never pronounced before, who remixed I Don't Know What You Want, But I Can't Give It Anymore. And this came on 2 CD singles that were released in America, so there's a total of 12 different mixes of the track, but in the UK it wasn't released for ages, so you could only get it in the US as a CD single. It was released as a promotional 12-inch, Break for Love. It's a cover version of a track written by a guy called Vaughan Mason, who I've never heard the original. But effectively it's a long instrumental bleepy bloopy kind of track. I really like it, but it is B-side material, not single material, which is good, because I think it turned out to be the B-side on the first Pet Shop Boys single from their next album, Home and Dry. In the run-up to the release of Home and Dry and Release, there was a curiosity came out, which was this, the Pet Shop Boys EP, which was only a CD that again was cover mounted with a newspaper, this time round perhaps the slightly more palatable Daily Mirror, and this, it doesn't tell me which issue this was on the front of. It's got 3 audio tracks, so it's got You Only Tell Me You Love Me When You're Drunk, Break for Love, and the Red Zone remix of So Hard. Effectively it's like a 4th CD single, but it's there because I've got all their stuff. It's certainly not worth, although it's probably about 25 pence on Discogs, if that. The first single that was released from the album was Home and Dry, and if you're on the Pet Shop Boys mailing list, I think they all lived in Leamington Spa at 3 Alveston Place. You were given a sense of slipcase so you could put your 3 CDs in, but it wasn't 3 CDs, it was 2 CDs and a DVD single. One of the most dreaded formats in the history of mankind is the DVD single. And Home and Dry, they kind of took a completely different approach to visuals than they'd done previously, because normally the Pet Shop Boys had done a very kind of low-key graphic approach where their logo was very small. For this time around they went completely the opposite way, and they went for a high vis, high contrast, their name in big letters, big text all over it, 2 CDs and a DVD single. So the CDs came with now this is a bizarre one actually, because the first CD was backed with Sexy Northerner and Always. Sexy Northerner is one of the best B-sides of all time. which I'll touch upon later, should have been on the album. The second CD here was backed with an ambient mix of Home and Dry and 2 remixes of Break for Love, a UK radio edit and a high pass mix. And the DVD version of Home and Dry came with the video for Home and Dry, which is pretty terrible, a USA club mix of Break for Love as an audio track, and a third track called Nightlife, which was the title track to the Nightlife album, and of course was originally the title track to the Nightlife musical that later evolved, morphed, transformed into the Closer to Heaven release. So there's 3 CDs or 3 digital mini disc things. And Home and Dry also had a release as a promotional 12-inch. It didn't have a barcode in, didn't contribute towards chart positions, but with these kind of circumstances, promotional 12 inches were really, really easy to find if you went into record shops. Maybe you couldn't buy it from HMV, but you could certainly buy it from Sister Ray. And it's got 4 remixes of Home and Dry on the ambient mix, which is on the CD single, an a cappella version, and 2 Blank and Jones remixes. Although this tells you that the promotional record has been released by EMI and the express condition of ownership and title remains vested in EMI, which may require delivery up of the record at any time, I don't think any record label has ever asked for the promotionals back. If they have, I mean, certainly they would go and contact somebody and go, well, can I have it back? And that person would go, no. I've taken it down to MVE and I've traded it in with a whole bunch of other promos, and they're now selling it for 50p in the bargain basement, which is where I get an awful lot of my promos from, or where I used to. Home and Dry was not my favourite Pet Shop Boys single at all. It takes its name from that very British phrase, I'm home and dry. Britain being normally an extremely wet country, being home and being dry and being protected from the elements is a very good thing. And the video for Home and Dry is a little bit controversial. It's effectively shots of a mouse at a tube station, and I think 4 or 5 shots of the band performing live on stage at the Empty Heaven nightclub. I thought Home and Dry was a bad choice for a first single. What we'd found is, and I think a lot of bands had got to this point in their careers, is that they'd gone so far. Is that if you look at the sleeve artwork for something like Nightlife, the Pet Shop Boys almost obliterated their own image of themselves as actual human beings. They've become avatars called Neil and Chris that somehow presented themselves as existing in the universe as some kind of disco Gilbert and George. And I think maybe there was a kind of like a reaction to that, because every Pet Shop Boys album is a reaction to the one that happened previously. The reaction was to go actually for quite a straight, quite a sincere approach. So the pretense which you may have had around the orange wigs and the outfits and things like that was kind of pretty much thrown away, and the band represented themselves as almost like starting again. And for that as well, they also represented themselves in a very different light. They did what they call the University Tour. Here's a couple of pages from the Pet Shop Boys catalogue of the 2006 book of their artwork, which is absolutely essential if you're into design. And the University Tour was the first time that the band had actually toured in the kind of venues that almost everybody plays when they start out as a band. Universities, colleges, small clubs, things like that. They played the Astoria in London. They played, I think, UEA in Norwich. They played like Leicester or some other places to maybe 1,500 people, whereas the previous tour had been arenas to 10,000 seaters. And they also stripped away all of the costumes, all of the outfits around that, all of the presentations about the sequencing. They created a 5-piece band, which was a guitar player, a drummer, an additional instrumentalist, Chris on keyboards, Neil on vocals, guitar and keyboards, and it almost presented themselves as almost a traditional rock band, although obviously traditional rock and Pet Shop Boys do not necessarily go together. They presented themselves in a very traditional 5-piece band facing the crowd kind of way, with lights and lasers, as opposed to films and screens and backdrops and projections and outfits and wigs and duets with dead people via the miracle of VHS. Those type of things they didn't do. And there was still a lot of interest in the band, but they were playing places that were 10 times smaller than the venues that they played previously. So of course, putting a sold out sign on a venue that's only got 10% of the capacity of where you last played is very easy to do. I remember they played the London Astoria on Valentine's Day 2002, and that Valentine's Day, I have no regrets about seeing Pet Shop Boys, because Pet Shop Boys stayed in my life a heck of a lot longer than the person that I was meant to be my Valentine on that particular day. And Release as an album soundtracks to me, the end of a relationship. In the way that Nightlife soundtracks the end of a relationship, my love life was fairly eventful around about that time. I was 27. I'd made the decision in late 2000 that I couldn't stay in the Midlands and in Birmingham anymore. I had to move away. There's a wonderful line in From Despair to Where by the Mount Street Preachers, where James sings, "I have poisoned every room in this house," and every part of Birmingham and every part of the Midlands had ceased to feel like home to me. It had been poisoned by bad memories, and I just had enough. Full stop. I had decided the time was, if I don't do it now, I'll never ever get to do it. I have no ties that stop me from moving down to London and starting again. And I was thinking this when I sat down earlier on, actually downstairs, and I was just looking out into the garden. I'm thinking, I'm in a house. I've got a garden. I've got cats. I've got you know a partner, children, and where my life is now compared to where it was 21 years ago is unrecognisable. And I've become incredibly lucky to be able to have the life that I have now. It's not fallen into my lap. I've had to work very, very hard for it. But at the same point, it's there's risks around that. I took some enormous risks moving down to London, and sometimes I fell very, very flat on my face, and it hurt greatly. But I kind of moved through those, and where I am now is certainly better than anywhere I could have imagined being 21 years ago today. And without wishing to get too, maudlin about it, Release soundtracked a new part of my life, a new phase of my life. And the word release kind of ties in with an emotional release, a sexual release, the idea of being, released from the confines of whatever it was that you had previously. And to some extent, I think the band chose that because the album that they released was very, very different from people's conceptions of what they were. Now, in time, I think I've come to realise that Release is one of my least favourite Pet Shop Boys albums, but I have to talk about why and how that is the case. So this is a promotional CD of it that came in a stickered sleeve that was sealed, so you could tell if anybody had had a chance to listen to it before. And also, I think some of these CDs may have been specifically watermarked, which was an anti-piracy measure at the time, which is that they introduced some inaudible glitches into the sound that wouldn't affect how human ears could hear it. But if somebody was to download an MP3, they would be able to detect clearly which journalist, which press agency, which nightclub, which TV company had leaked this particular version of the track or this particular album. And it's a 10-track album that presented itself in a very austere, very minimal, very straightforward set of packaging in this form here. So there's just their name again in big letters and a silver bit of text there. The commercial release of the album came in a slightly different form. So there were 6 different covers for Release, by the way. There were 4 CDs that came in various shades here. Then there was this version, which is the Japanese CD, and the standard LP, which came in a kind of black and grey sleeve here. And this was at the time when vinyl was really very much a niche product. Hence, this is the 2017 remaster and repressing of it, which contains on the inner sleeve the full colour photograph of the flower. So Release, kind of the idea being is that the flower opens, the seeds come out, seeds are planted, that type of thing. And it's a very straightforward album in terms of its instrumentation. It's not ostentatious at all. Almost all of the songs are written by Neil and Chris. Johnny Marr plays guitar on more than half of the songs. Neil plays guitar on a number of the songs as well. They have bass on a number of songs by Steve Walters. Drums were played live as well, percussion by Jody Linscott. But it does also have what I regard to be two of the worst Pet Shop Boys songs that have ever been released. And so that's probably why it alongside Bilingual is probably amongst my least favourite Pet Shop Boys albums. But the reason being is that where I was and where the band were not the same. And I think one of the other things with experimentation, and they were experimenting with being a more conventional rock band, is that sometimes you aim and you hit the target, and sometimes you miss. Um, in between this album and the B-sides and the next album I'm going to be talking about shortly, there is one really, really good studio record. And there's a whole bunch of B-sides, which was a problem that faced a number of bands in 2002. You know, they come through the first flush of fame, and then they kind of go, well, what do I do next? You know, and then you carry on, and then you make more music. And is that because you're used to it? Is that it's just become a job now, and you're going to have to do concept albums about the sex life of whales or something? I don't know. You know, the idea of writing songs and putting those songs out because that was the expectation. You know, what it means is an album comes out every few years, whether there's an album to come out or not. And I think Release was probably the weakest of the albums that they've done. Home and Dry is a good song, but it's not a great first single. I Get Along, which is the second single, by the way, is really good. Birthday Boy, the third track, is a bit weak, a bit anodyne. I'm not quite sure what the purpose of Birthday Boy is, but as the third song on the album, what it's clearly kind of telling you is that the band have changed. It's not, you know, like the poster for Star Trek: The Next Generation said, it's not your daddy's Star Trek anymore. This is not. It's Pet Shop Boys, but not as you know them. The fourth song is London, which is a great song, actually. I'll talk about that in a minute. The fifth one is Email, which is quite, I mean, lyrically, a lot of the songs on this are quite, they're a little unfocused, actually. You know, Email is about send me an email and tell me that I love you. You know, and I'm like, that's not quite so sure. You flip over side two, because we're still working on side twos here, boys and girls. The Samurai in Autumn. It's a great song. Absolutely great song. Love is a Catastrophe. Oh, that's not a good song at all. Then there's Here. And Here it was originally called, I think, Home. And may have been written for the musical. But obviously you've already got Home and Dry. So if you have a song called Home and one called Home and Dry, the confusion is, well, are they just two parts of the same song? Are they two separate songs? Anyway, Here was released, and that's a good song. I really like that, and the band liked it as well, so they went back and remixed it and re-recorded it later on. And then there is the worst song on a Pet Shop Boys album, The Night I Fell in Love, which is crazy in so much as the lyric is a kind of juvenile reimagining of a gay encounter between Eminem and a teenage fan backstage, which quotes lines from Eminem's Stan, and it's awful, it's tasteless, it's presumptive. It's not quite as bad as the bit in Ready Player One, when the Iron Giant suddenly turns into a gigantic robotic killing machine, despite the end of the last film that the Iron Giant was in saying, I am not a gun. But it is most definitely ill-timed. See, great art should be timeless. It should exist outside of time. It should speak to the times, and it should be reminiscent of the times. And you know, sometimes when, you know, we have memories that we have that are associated with certain periods of time, certain periods of history, and we listen to certain songs and we go, that song, you know, is forever summer 1996 to me, or whatever the summer's going to be. And The Night I Fell in Love is forever a bad joke from the end of 2001, where somebody in Pet Shop Boys decided, well, we're going to write a fan fiction song about falling in love with a rapper called Eminem, and we're going to quote the song Stan. And nobody said, guys, this is a really bad idea, because instantly you've time-stamped and dated that song to a very specific period of time, and that means that the song will age like milk. And oh my god, the song has aged like milk. It is awful. Listening to it now, 20 years after release, and I'm just kind of there going, what the hell were you guys thinking? This is not even B-side material. This is box set after you're dead type material. It drags the album down catastrophically, with, I think, a tasteless lyric, and also one which was dated before it even came out. You know, it would be like if the Beatles had reformed in 1996 and done a song called "The Summer of Britpop." Everyone would just be going, "No." Actually, no, not Beatles reformed in 1996. They reformed in 2001 and done a song called "The Great Summer of Britpop," and everyone would be like, "Ringo, mate, stop. This is shit." So "The Night I Fell in Love" is my least favourite Pet Shop Boys track, because it's dated, and it's dated terribly. It's shackled itself round the neck of a cultural event that is now meaningless to the vast majority of people, and confusing to the people that don't understand it, and bizarre and baffling to the people that do. On a brighter note, there's only one more song on the album to go, and it's called "You Choose." And "You Choose" is pretty good, but it's not amazing. "You Choose" is the flip side of Love Comes Quickly, because "You Choose" is also kind of like a sequel to "Happiness is an Option" from Nightlife, which is, you don't fall in love, you choose, as opposed to "Love Comes Quickly," you can't help falling. And there's an idea around, and this is where I quote one of the characters from Coronation Street, "It is up to us how we play the cards, but we don't get to choose the cards that we're dealt." And that's maybe the philosophy that comes alongside it. In the US, by the way, the release got a 2-disc version. All the versions of release came in the UK at least, came in one of these kind of like, shaped packs, and then the American version came in a 2 CD set. You can look very, very carefully there. You can see Pet Shop Boys is printed in white, on white, the same kind of approach that they had with the frosted cover on Bilingual, the Lego box cover on Very, and then there's 2 CDs, one of which is a standard 10-track album, and then the other one is I think a 10-track or 9-track B-sides, because the singles weren't being released in America, by the way. So the limited double CD featured exclusive bonus tracks, including, well, basically all the B-sides to Home and Dry, some of the B-sides that there were on the Close to Heaven soundtrack, one of the remixes of Break for Love, and one of the remixes of Home and Dry as well. And it came with a special flip card here and a sticker that came on the sleeve. So I very cheekily adapted the 2 CD case and put it inside the white plastic single CD case that we had, and then managed to make it all kind of work in there. It's a real design classic, lovely bit of CD design. You can tell when you're holding it, you're holding an object that isn't just MP3s in a box. And packaging was where I think the industry really had to struggle to try and elevate the concept of selling records and music, because everything was now free on Napster. YouTube hadn't yet invented, streaming hadn't been monetized, so they had to go for special packaging with things like CDs, DVDs, bonus discs, special packaging, shaped sleeves. It really was a triumph of design. Now, the second single from the album that came out was "I Get Along," and "I Get Along," by the way, has some of the best sleeve art that I've ever seen. So, for example, on this one, I tried to get off with somebody I used to work with last night. Oh dear. So there's a number of sleeve designs around. There's 2 CDs for "I Get Along" and the DVD as well, each of which features a different pie chart and a different set of designs, and a coloured sticker to tell you which one it is. And so figure 01, now I'm guessing this is CD 01, is "I Get Along," which is a song that's been written from the perspective of a politician that was working with the then Prime Minister Tony Blair, but had fallen out of grace and favour. When Peter Mandelson, who was a British politician, had listened to it, he thought, "Oh God, that's me, isn't it?" And he was right. It's backed with "Searching for the Face of Jesus" and "Between Two Islands," and a CD-ROM video of "I Get Along." CD-ROMs, what terrible, terrible format those were as well. It's like the internet, but much smaller and crapper. Then CD 2 of I Get Along featured 3 live songs, so live versions of "I Get Along," "Red Letter Day," and "Love Comes Quickly," recorded at the BBC Radio Theatre on the 15th of March 2002. And by the way, the version of "Love Comes Quickly" that's on here is wonderful. It's one of the best versions of "Love Comes Quickly" that you'll ever hear. And then the The DVD single is the video for I Get Along, audio friendly fire, and a remix of Home and Dry, the Blank and Jones remix that's on the promotional 12-inch. So they really went, overboard with this stuff. And again, CD, postcard sets. You would get sent promotional postcards that would advertise the album and the singles and the live shows here, including playing such lovely places as Grimsby, on what I think was Neil's birthday, actually, July the 10th, which he said was one of his least favourite shows, because he's in Grimsby on his birthday. But also, the wraparound 3 CD kind of box set envelope. It's fair to say, Release didn't do particularly well on release. The band were playing Brixton Academy. They weren't playing Wembley Arena. They're playing Brighton Centre, which again they'd been playing for over 10 years. We saw them at Brighton Centre. That was a great fun, but good God, the weather wouldn't quit. It was horrendous weather. I thought playing Brighton on a Monday in July, the weather would have been beautiful. It was like living in a floodplain. And I enjoyed the show, but I'd split up with somebody the week before, and I went on a date with somebody, which turned out pretty well, actually. But it was a difficult show because it was the 5-piece version of Pet Shop Boys playing a show that was too small for the rooms that they were playing in, because obviously they were playing with lights and musicians, and people were used to a multimedia extravaganza with films and costumes and wigs and dogs and all that type of stuff. And I think it's fair to say that the album fell on its face commercially. It didn't sell particularly well. The shows didn't sell particularly well. The band were a little bit out of time there with the rest of the world around them. It just didn't feel like the band were hitting. Every band has a period where it's imperial, and then where it's not imperial. And if the band were most definitely not in their imperial phase there, they were on the ropes a little. So much so that the third single from the album was only released in Germany, and it was only released on CD. It is London, featuring specially shot photographs of dilapidated pigeons. This features just one extra track, Positive Role Model, the Neil vocal version of the track From Closer to Heaven, getting a long overdue recording with Neil on vocals, which of course I mentioned before, I saw them play live at Glastonbury. 2 remixes of London, the Berlin radio mix and the Genuine piano mix, and then a second CD in Germany again with West Bam and the Radical Blake Loeb on remix juices. Remixes are pretty good, but not amazing. It took me a lot of effort and a lot of time to get these released, actually, or to buy these from abroad, because buying CD singles from Germany, even then, was not particularly easy. The next thing that came out was kind of a counter-reaction, a course correction of sorts, because I think people felt that Pet Shop Boys had abandoned disco. They'd abandoned their strengths, which is electronics, computers, sequencers. They'd abandoned disco, and so the next album to come out, instead of London in the UK, it was this album, Disco 3, following on from Disco 1, which was Pet Shop Boys remixes of Pet Shop Boys tracks. Disco 2, which was a mega sequenced ultra mega mix jive bunny, rave bunny type thing. Disco 3 was a number of remixes and a number of new songs, so almost like an updated version of Release. So the CD has Time on My Hands, Positive Role Model, Somebody Else's Business, If Looks Could Kill, as well as a first album appearance for a remix of Sexy Northerner, and remixes of London and Home and Dry, as well as a track called Try It, I'm in Love with a Married Man. Now, 4 of these songs, Time on My Hands, Try It, and If Looks Could Kill, were recorded for a John Peel session in 2002, alongside an extra track called A Powerful Friend. And A Powerful Friend was also recorded in the studio in 2002. So those 4 songs were actually very, very early Pet Shop Boys songs that they'd gone back and they'd re-recorded with the benefit of hindsight and about 15 years of experience and a bit of extra money. And effectively, Disco 3 was a not quite obvious attempt at salvaging perhaps the commercial failure of and maybe critical failure of the Release era. And Disco 3 was just another Pet Shop Boys album at the time. You know, it started to feel that they were putting out, well, whatever they felt like it. Final edition of Disco 3, by the way, not been repressed or reissued, is a triple album featuring 2 songs on each of the 6 sides, so 12 songs in total, different track listing than the CD, featuring extra remixes of London and Here, and an extended version of Somebody Else's Business. Hard to get these days because it hasn't been reissued or repressed, and it really should have been. But it's a great album, actually. I really like Disco 3, and if you can take the best of Disco 3 and the best of Release, you've got a really good Pet Shop Boys album. But it's not quite good enough, because the next thing that happened after that was the release of a greatest hit set, their second greatest hit set, PopArt, and it felt to me that this was almost a recovery period for the band. So there were 2 singles that were released from it. The first one is Miracles, which came on 2 CD singles. This has one of the best B-sides ever recorded. It's a cover of a track by My Robot Friend, and the track is called We're the Pet Shop Boys, which is an alternate. It's basically a song tribute to Pet Shop Boys, made up out of fragments of their lyrics rearranged. It's fantastic, and why We're the Pet Shop Boys is not on their greatest hits album, I don't know. They played it live in 2007, and it was the perfect song opener. You know, We're the Pet Shop Boys. The second CD single has an extended mix, a lemon jelly mix of the track Miracles and a track called Transparent. Now, Miracles is the first single that came from the PopArt compilation, and Miracles is almost a kind of like a flip side response song to something like You Choose. You know, it's like clouds clear, and all of a sudden you're here, and everything's and it's Miracles, and it's, you know, a very lovely. Nobody writes love songs quite as good as Neil Tennant. Now, actually, in terms of the formatting, the best format of Miracles is this 12-inch, by the way, which has a sticker sleeve here on there and a die cut, so it's got Neil and the outline of Neil with an inner sleeve of some flowers, and on the B side there's the outline of Chris. And if you can get into it, well, I'm not prepared to open it after 18, 19 years to find out, there is a white vinyl 12-inch in as well. It's a gorgeous bit of packaging. And if you can't afford to get PopArt on vinyl, because frankly it's a 6-album box set, or it's a triple album box set that's been hugely limited. And I mean, even the last time I saw a physical copy, it was £80, and that was something like 10 years ago. Actually, no, it was longer than 10 years ago now. It was like 13, 14 years ago, just after the album had come out. So don't bother trying to get PopArt on vinyl unless you've got money to burn, at which point just give me the money, guys. Miracles is a great song. And then there was the greatest hits album, PopArt. And PopArt, this is the 3 CD version that's called PopArt Mix. One CD is pop music, so it's Go West and Say Vida A and What Have I Done to Deserve This, and the other one is arty stuff, so Left to My Own Devices, You Only Tell Me You Love Me When You're Drunk. And the third CD is Mix, which is a compilation remix album. And the sleeve is wonderful. It takes the striped orange and white from the pointy hats period and the striped black and white from the suburbia period, and it kind of folds it all out into an absolutely fantastic piece of design. And the sleeve booklet, by the way, absolutely gorgeous, kind of folds out into this huge kind of compendium of images of the band throughout their career, really kind of interweaving everything together to create one general cohesive whole. It's a lovely bit of design, PopArt, in whatever format you get it, but it is also a cynical restatement of the band, saying, hey, remember us? We're the Pet Shop Boys. There's a DVD, the first DVD that features all Pet Shop Boys videos in, features an absolutely fascinating and slightly bitchy commentary that runs for 41 songs across it, and there's a photo book in there as well that features selected stills from each one of the videos, which I think are arranged in a roughly chronological order, so you can kind of see the development of the band as visual artists over time. The last release from PopArt, and the last thing I really need to talk about, is Flamboyant, which was released as a 12-inch. Here again, in a stickered sleeve, and I think it was a coloured vinyl disc as well in there. But again, taking the typography, Neil on one side, Chris on the other. No, not coloured vinyl, just standard black. But black is the best colour that there is. It's what most of my t-shirts come in. And again, presenting the band as almost an object of desire from another country, using foreign typography. I think that's Japanese. 2 CD singles, backed with, I think there's a track called I Didn't Get Where I Am Today on there. And the last thing to mention is a promotional 12-inch. This one's pretty hard to get. The PopArt Hits sampler, which is a 6-track 12-inch of singles and remixes. That brings it to a close for release. Not my favourite Pet Shop Boys album at all. Like a lot of people, I think Pet Shop Boys were struggling with their identity to try and present themselves as to who they are, and asking the key questions: well, who am I? Where am I? What am I going to do? Effectively a midlife crisis. Neil Tennant's pension plan started, or was aimed to start, when he hit 47. And so what we've got now, really, from this period onwards, is the band doing things because they want to do them. So actually, to an extent, had this been a failure, PopArt would have been the end of the band. And that's where I'm going to end today's discussion, because I'm running out of time. I think it's just really important to say thank you for listening to me witter on about Britain's finest songwriting duo. Be lovely in the comments, and I will see you all again soon. Sorry this one was a rush, but there was an awful lot to talk about. I am now going to go downstairs, and I think I'm going to have a drink. Actually, it's that kind of weather. Take care of yourselves and each other. See you all soon. Bye.